Cannon Sports Podcast. On today's episode, we're joined by private defensive line coach and the D-line coach for College of the Canyons, Eddy McGilvra. Welcome in everybody to the Cannon Sports Podcast. I'm Phil George, and our guest today, he is a private defensive line coach and the defensive line coach at College of the Canyons, Coach Eddy McGilvra.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely.
This is awesome.
Appreciate you coming on. Before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself and give everybody a little bit of background as far as your playing career and subsequent entry into the coaching profession?
Yeah, of course. Eddy McGilvra, Coach Ed, defensive line coach, private defensive line coach. Work with, 40-plus guys throughout the NFL, some of them year-round, mostly in the off-season for training. Also coach junior college football. I'm the defensive line coach and special teams coordinator out at College of the Canyons. It's been, just finished my 8th year of coaching JUCO. Time flies, man. Makes me feel a little aged over here in the coaching world, but a lot of fun, man. It's a passion of mine, and love giving back.
Yeah, and you were talking about a little bit before the show, before we went on, about how specifically you got into coaching, and obviously, what you're doing now is certainly making a difference in so many guys' lives. Helping them get a little better, helping them get to those next levels, higher levels of football. But, the way that you got into coaching was, certainly not without your fair share of adversity, and admittedly probably not exactly how you saw your athletic career going. Can you kind of illustrate what that path was to coaching?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, injuries are part of the game. You learn to manage them the best you can, mostly playing through certain injuries. My injury was on the neck, so unfortunately it wasn't really an injury you could play through. Me being me, though, I pushed the limits, and unfortunately I fractured a vertebrae and severed 2 nerves, which was the end of my playing career. All good things come to an end, but it led me to the direction of coaching right away. It took about a year off, try to decompress and figure out what's next. I loved football. I thought football was everything for me. And the minute that happened, I was like, whoa, this is a little different. Well, what do I do in the real world? And I quickly realized after a year of just doing different jobs that my calling was in coaching, and was lucky. My defensive coordinator at the time got the head coaching job, and I was one of his first calls.
What were some of the things that you were doing in that in that year off before you made the firm decision that, okay, I'm getting back into football, I'm getting into coaching?
So I actually started doing private security. A friend of mine put me in touch with a security group out in Los Angeles, and they did different nightclub venues. So I was doing that for about a year. I actually continued to do that into my first 3 years of coaching JUCO ball. That was a tough balance, man. We're talking, start at 10 p.m. out there, get home by 4 a.m., wake up, go to coaching, go right back to work. And it was a pretty interesting world. It was all like A-class celebrities and who's who of Hollywood. So I was running the door at the nightclub. So I was meeting all types of people, man. It was, from Drake to, Julian Lennon. And, it was wild. It was a wild world. It was a lot of fun. It definitely opened my eyes to, kind of networking and meeting new people.
But even through all that, you knew that your calling was in this profession.
Yeah. Couldn't wait to stop the security to get just full time.
Yeah, I'm hearing your story. I'm reminded of the conversation that we had on our last episode with Air Justin, the private defensive backs coach, who has a similar story. Went through some injuries during his playing career. Got into coaching himself, and like yourself, is also coaching some high level talent. And a big part of what we talked about are the things that happen in an athlete's life that they can't control. And like you said, a big part of that is injuries. And what he was saying is, when you're faced with something like that, you have 2 choices. You can get down on yourself, you can complain about it, or you can get to work and find a solution. And look at the solution that you came to. And to go through those numbers again, at the age of 31, you've got more than 40 clients in the NFL, more than 100 college players, and you have elite guys at the high school level. So safe to say you definitely made the best of a not very pleasant situation. Looking at that network, and again, only 31 years old, you've been able to amass that. Before we even get to the technical side of things from a football coaching perspective, how did you go about building that strong of a network?
Oh, man, this is actually a question that I get asked a lot, and how I started. It wasn't necessarily like a plan of mine. I had a group of junior college kids that I was coaching and mentoring and developing. And when we were in our off-season phase, there's no resources for these kids. They're out here, some of them from out of state. They don't have money, they low income. And I just took my spare time that I had and got on the field with them and basically was running indies and developing them. And what I took from that was that there's really nobody doing what I was doing in the area. So I figured, hey, if I reach out to some high school coaches and maybe some kids will come out and I'll put a free clinic on over the weekend. And if some parents want to pay for extra training, like, so be it. Let's do it. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, I know I can do this, I'm a good trainer. I was learning everything from scratch. I'll be honest with you. I still to this day, every offseason, I feel like I pick up something new from somebody. And, that's part of football that I love. But once I started doing that and getting high school kids out, I think it kind of started to launch itself from there, where, parents wanted to get their kids with me to develop because they saw the type of, progress that these kids were receiving from me. And, it was just kind of, it was just kind of easy. I don't want to say it was easy because I worked hard, but it was kind of easy from there. Like, the word of mouth spread pretty quickly. It's a very, small world, football. It's huge, but it's just a small world. Once you know a couple coaches here and there, you can really make the most out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody in this world is all interconnected. We were talking before the show about how you were teammates with Evan Yabu over at over 1,000.
Yeah, that's my guy. Shout out Evan Yabu. He just took the Notre Dame job.
He sure did. Friend of the show over here. And talking about some of these guys that you coach, in addition to high level high school players whose parents wanted to get them with you, get a little better. Obviously, the kids wanted to get a little better too. Some of these guys that you coach at the higher levels. I mean, Kenny Clark, 2-time Pro Bowler, Aiden Hutchinson, who's the number 2 overall pick in this most recent draft. So these guys that you coach, they run the gamut from best of the best of the best, making millions in the NFL, top draft picks, to guys at the high school level. Broadly, who comes to see you and why?
Well, we'll start at the pro level. The guys that come to see me are the guys that, we work well together. It's not just me putting them through drills and, telling them what to do, like a practice. It's, I get a lot of feedback from them. Hey, what do you like? What do you not like? Let's work on this if you want to work on this. They usually come up with a plan during the season. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a client of mine. We talk almost every single day, and he already knows what he wants to do going into next offseason. So it gives me time to prep and get those guys ready. That's a different level of focus. These guys know exactly what they want to do. They have the resources, and they go and most of them, they do it.
So it's really individualized.
It is. It's very specialized per player, I would say, as well, too. And they get together as well. Like, vets will get together, and they'll bounce ideas off each other. And I think that's where we really grow together through the training is, Kenny might not be good at this, but I got a guy out there that's really good at it. And he's able to show Kenny a couple things where he gets to see him go through the drills and do it, and then I get to put, so on and so forth.
Do you ever look at a guy, I mean, obviously somebody comes to you and says, okay, this is what I want to get better at, this is what I feel my deficiencies are. Is it ever the other way around where, you maybe look at film on a guy and say, okay, this is what I want to teach you, this is where I think you could stand to improve?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. They'll tell me what they like, and then I'll tell them what I like, and I would say almost all the time it's a great marriage.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily saying, I don't want to do that. And if they do, no ego. They're a pro. They got to do what they do. But a big reason why they come to me is because they trust my eyes and they trust what I see for them.
Yeah, I mean, it takes, to be blunt, it takes some balls to look an NFL player in the eye and tell him what he could do better. I
try my best to humble some of them, man, and they do the same for me. Those guys are just extremely hard workers. They never take days off. Whether it's film, recovery, field work, they get done with the season and it's right back to work.
Yeah, and that's the guys at the upper level of the NFL. But do you kind of vary up the way that you coach a player depending on what level of play he's at?
Yeah, I think it's the level of focus that separates most elite talent You can be a really good athlete and have really low focus levels and really struggle to pick up some of the stuff that you need to get to the highest levels. I would say mostly, it happens, the biggest separation is from high school to college. A lot of 4 or 5 star kids will get to the college level and they'll struggle because they have a lack of maybe focus or ability to pick things up as quickly, or maybe they're not working as hard. But you'll see that's the biggest separation. From college to the NFL is more so like, hey, make sure you put yourself in the right situation to stay healthy and to continuing developing throughout the years, or else, that league will eat you up pretty quickly.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about your style of coaching and what you focus on, and also what you don't focus on. You're not a weight room guy.
Not a weight room guy. Obviously around a lot of those people, so I do know my way around. But I stick to what I know, and I stick to what I'm good at. Defensive line, play, interior, edge rushers, a big on mechanics, mobility, fluid transition from their movement on the field in preparation, their drills transferring to in-game type situations. Huge on hand placement, eye coordination, eye discipline. Footwork is number one for me in every program that I start. I start from the ground up, from your base. Film study, I think, which is something that goes unspoken at high school and college level. In the NFL, that's everything. If you can have an idea and a muscle memory of what the guy's going to do before he does it, you can anticipate it mentally, and that helps you a lot in the physical sense. So most guys that come to me, the first thing I'll do, I'll give you an example, is if I haven't worked with him before, I'll take about 12 to 20 hours of film, and I'll watch him from as long as he's been in the league.
12 to 20 hours.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but a lot of people won't put that work in. And I think that's why I'm able to kind of elevate so quickly. Is I'm a nerd for it, man. I love it. I love the game. I love the grind. And the details are everything. So I'm seeing how this player moves when he's doing well and when he's not. And when he's not doing well, almost 100% of the time, it's his feet, or it's his eyes, or it's his hand placement. So it's things you can fix. These things are very, very fixable. You have to be able to focus on them and see them and adjust. And then when they're doing well, you can point those things out and you say, look where your hands are on this rep. Look where your feet were. Look where your pad level was. Look where your hands, like everything goes together. So once they start to realize that, it makes it really easy. You get to the field and you're able to flow through those progressions, and you always get to remind them, hey, why do you think that rep was so bad? Oh, my feet, exactly. And that's what happens on Sundays is you mess up a rep. It's not because you're not good enough. You just slip technically. And that's a big part of my program.
Yeah, and you're not just a film junkie yourself, but you're instilling that in your players that you got to be a film 100%. Junkie yourself. Yeah,
and we watch a lot together, and I think that's big. Is it being able to speak the same language and have the same terminology, so that way he knows what I'm seeing and I see what he needs to do to get to the quarterback. Not a lot of time to get there. 2.3 seconds, man. That's it.
Yeah, and it's not just on field work. It's not just work in the film room, but you focus a lot on off the field habits and making sure that those are tightened up. And one term that you're very fond of, I know, is work-life balance. And that struck me because that's not really a term that you hear applied to athletes a lot. You hear that term applied in the professional world. Not that these guys aren't professionals. It's a job. Just They go to work every day just like you and I do, but but even then, that's a much more corporate term that you don't hear applied to athletes. So talk about why that's so important and what you do to make sure that those guys have their work-life balance where it needs to be.
You put a lot of pressure on yourself as an athlete. Every day is wake up, attack the day, get better at something. And a lot of the times we get lost in that and put too much pressure on ourselves and start to stress out. And, that can affect us in so many different ways. And I'm a firm believer that if you're able to find balance throughout your days and find happiness and peace of mind in doing other things than just your passion or your sport or your job, you have to find balance for yourself. And if you can do that, you can you can find peace of mind and be a better person. And it's definitely hard to do because we get so overly focused in being great. We want to be great at this, we want to be great at that. But at the end of the day, like, you're only going to be great if you're free, free up top, man. The mind is everything. And I found a lot of freedom in yoga, in hot yoga. A lot of my players will come in the off season, and we'll go to the field, we'll watch film, and then later in the evening before dinner or whatever it may be, we all go to yoga together. And that was very freeing mentally. A lot of us were so used to, hey, when I'm with Eddy, or hey, when I'm with so and so, we're working. And this was more of hey, just free your mind for a little bit, be with your body, and try to let everything go. And I started seeing results a lot faster. Just guys were more clear thinking, and it's great bonding and great chemistry building. So big believer in just figuring out what brings balance to your work life, to your personal life, and attack that just like you would attack everything else.
We venerate the work ethic of a guy like Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. And, obviously for good reason. The man is, depending on who you ask, a top 3 player of all time. He's number 1.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah, absolutely. And, during his career, his workout routine is the stuff of legends. 6 days a week, 6 hours a day. And, like I said, you see the result. But when you're talking about work-life balance, obviously not everybody's Kobe, but is that a healthy level of work for guys to be putting in on a daily basis?
Well, I think it speaks a lot for Kobe. That was his peace.
Yeah.
That was his peace of mind, was having that routine and working like that towards his goals. And that's more of what I mean in finding balance in yourself, is what brings you peace, what brings your clarity of thinking. And it's not, as some people it might be, hey, I got to go to the gym 3 times a day. If that's what it is, great, good for you. Some people would say, I can't talk to anybody, got to turn my phone off. Oh, I got to go on a walk. You have to be able to experiment a little bit and find out who you are to be able to find that balance.
Yeah, so it's not so much about finding things to do that have nothing to do with your physical health, nothing to do with football, nothing to do with being in the gym. We're not talking about find balance by getting out of the gym and sitting in front of the PS4 and playing video games. Not that there's anything wrong with that, doing
right.
that, doing that for a small period of time. We're talking about, doing things that are productive, that are going to make you a better player, but also in a way that, you're not hating it and you're not killing yourself to do it.
Exactly. You don't want to feel forced. You want it to be organic. You don't want to put more pressure onto yourself to find the balance.
Right.
It should come naturally to you. And everybody has their thing. I'll be my biggest thing is spending time with my family. I don't get too much family time, and when I do, I definitely cherish it. I disconnect from everything else and I focus on where my feet are, and try to spend as much time with my family as possible. Some people it might be, I don't want to see my family. Some people are the opposite, and that's their balance. But as long as you are knowing yourself and you are at peace, then I think you are at a perfect balance to be able to attack your daily goals. I really do.
So let's talk about the pre-NFL draft and combine work that you do. That's a big part of what you do, and that's really the season that we're in right now. So many guys have already seen their college careers come to an end, and for the rest, bowl season wraps up in less than a month. So from that point, what do the next few months look like for a college athlete who are looking to make that leap forward?
So as you're seeing right now, all the games ending, guys are opting out of bowl games. Most of them have, an agent in mind, or they've signed to an agency. They're basically setting up their next 8 to 10 weeks. They'll come in, they'll train for the combine, they'll train for position work for the NFL. They'll go through their media training, they'll go through their interview training. They'll meet, they'll work on their branding. So it's a very condensed condensed work in a short amount of time. And they have, so the combine, I want to say, is at the end of February. It's the last weekend of February in Indy. And they have pretty much right now until then to get ready to run, the 40 and jump and do all that kind of stuff, perform at a high level. And people don't talk about this enough. The Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine Game, those bowl games, they have to go there and compete there. Hopefully they're healthy enough, and then come back and, they're putting their bodies and minds through a lot. And I don't know if you've ever been to a Senior Bowl before. It's an amazing event. I suggest it to anybody. Jim Nagy does an incredible job out there. But it's a lot for the kids. They're up at 6 a.m. They're at practice by 7, and then they get done with practice, and it is meetings, interviews all day long, agents till like 12:30 p.m., and then they're right back to it.
Wow.
So it's a tough week for them. It's a lot of pressure. But that's why guys like myself, this is where we come in the mix, where I'll host a Senior Bowl prep class, and I'll get them basically ready for the Senior Bowl, in 2 phases: ready for the Senior Bowl, ready for the Combine, and then ready for the NFL. So they come to guys like me who have a program, and I put them through the 8 to 10 week program, and usually they're at a facility like the one we're in right now, Proactive Sports. Ryan Capretta, he's been in this business for a very long time, and he's been doing this at a high level for a long time. So that's kind of why you were seeing the athletes coming in and out. They're all getting ready, and it's usually, anywhere from 12 to 20 guys in a program. Some places do it bigger, smaller. But they're professionals. They get these guys ready to run low times, jump high numbers, push with heavy weights. And so it's a lot of fun, man. It's a great environment.
Yeah, I bet. And such an exciting time for these kids. I want to go back to something that you just said at the top of your answer to that question, which is the practice of opting out of bowl games. And that's something that has, really become a lot more common, and it's a hot button issue. It's, a little bit of a controversial issue depending on who you talk to, obviously from the perspective of the athlete. Yes, of course they want to win the bowl game. They want to finish what they started with their teammates, but they also got to look out for themselves. You don't want to get injured and, sacrifice draft position, that whole thing. But, then again, on the other side, from the fan perspective, there can be some backlash from that perspective toward an athlete who does that. It's looked at as a loyalty thing. It's looked at as, you're not finishing what you started with this team and with your teammates. So, from your perspective, kind of make the case for and against that practice and where you come down.
Well, this is what I'll say to any fan that's like anti, bowl game opt out is, if you had a chance to become a millionaire and all it took was, be healthy to that point, I'm pretty sure they would all be opting out of bowl games too. And it's mostly people that, maybe don't understand the big business of sports, especially college ball. I'm big on, hey, if you have a plan, and part of your plan is to opt out, then by all means execute your plan and go with the sources that you trust. Most of these college kids that you see opting out are kids that have already signed to agents or an agency. They have been, educated on all options: play, don't play, be there but don't play, come here, train early, how it helps them. And most of these kids already have an idea of their draft stock. So, I'm sure you might know how it goes. The NFL draft it's capped out per round, basically, on a number. So if you're a top 100 pick, my man, I'm not turning down a couple $1 million for a bowl game. Like, it's just not happening. And that's where most of these kids are. So, I respect it. As long as you have a plan, you can execute it. And at the end of the day, it is a big, big business, and you got to do what's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking about draft stock and draft boards, we keep an eye on the draft boards all year. And over the course of the last 5 months, we've seen guys rise and fall all over the boards. And even after all the NFL teams have had a full season to watch these guys play, take stock of who they are, what they've done, what they bring to the table, what are some of the things that these guys can do now to make sure that their final impressions headed into the draft are the absolute best that they can be?
Well, it's a test. It's all a test. From the minute you're, done playing college ball up to the day you're drafted, it's an absolute interview with everything that you're doing. How you go about this process of training, the tedious, training of a 40-yard dash comes down to milliseconds. How you put your hand to your foot to where you're, there's so much to it that's part of the test. That's part of the interview. And GMs and scouts and coaches, they want to see, hey, did so-and-so, how did he do with all that? How did he do at the Senior Bowl with all those interviews? How did he do with the lack of sleep and preparation? And, does he feel overwhelmed? All those little things matter. At the end of the day, you're investing millions of dollars into these players. So you want to know what you're getting back in return. So it's a huge deal. Like, the scope is massive. These guys are calling ex-girlfriends from high school and Was he nice to you? Did he hold the door open? I have heard it all.
So that scene in draft day where he asked the quarterback, hey,
it's a little Hollywood, right?
But that scene where he asked him, hey, did anybody come to your birthday party? Like,
right.
so that's real. That actually happened.
That's a real deal. That's real deal stuff. Man, I've heard it all. There's some crazy stories. I mean, I had a guy go to the combine, and they put him in a room by himself when he was getting his medical done. They put him in a room by himself for 4 hours with no cell phone. Nobody came to check on him. They were testing him because he tested so well in character that they wanted to see if they could find something to break his character. That's how they go to the extreme.
And how did he do?
He passed with flying colors, man.
So what were they looking for? They left him
to maybe a little anger, maybe a little upset, but he was just like, all good. Walked out, grabbed the water. And some guys, there's some stories that it hasn't been that way.
Are you comfortable sharing who that was?
I'd rather just leave his name out.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'd leave his name out of it. But he's a great guy, and he passed every test with flying colors, and that's a big reason why he's still in the NFL right now, as an undrafted guy. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
We said at the top of the show that, one of the guys that you worked with on the pre-draft preparation was Aiden Hutchinson. Again, he was the number 2 overall pick in the most recent draft, and he's, enjoying a phenomenal rookie season with Detroit. He's, one of the front runners for defensive rookie of the year. And, we see his measurables, 6'7", 264. We see what he did in college from a statistical standpoint. We could watch his highlight tape, and, based on all that, it's no surprise that he went as high as he did. I mean, hell, if there's any surprise, the surprise is that he didn't go number 1.
Yeah, it was a surprise.
Right. But what did we not see? What kind of work were you guys putting in behind the scenes to make sure that he went where he did? I mean, you talk about the 40-yard dash, and that comes down to milliseconds. Well, there's so much work that goes into even shaving that couple of milliseconds off of your time. Talk about what that grind was like specifically with him.
Well, with him, it was almost, guys like that are Ferraris. They're Lamborghinis. You're not going to make them faster or stronger. You're gonna break them, if anything. So you have to be careful. You're not going to make a Ferrari faster than what it is. Now, you can work with it and tune it up a little bit, but, Aiden's mindset was so different coming into it. He knew exactly what he wanted to run in the 40, what he wanted to jump, how he wanted to go through the drills for combine. He knew everything. He's very well, brought up. His mom and dad did an excellent job. That family's incredible. But I think the most important part of his process that I noticed the most with him was he had fun. It was so much fun for him. He had a great group of guys around him that were also doing what he was doing. Spending time with them outside of the training was awesome. He bought into everything the trainers were telling him, the speed coach was telling him, and he had fun. And when you're mixing that with that type of talent, and he wants to do it, and he enjoys doing it, and he's competing to run faster, those type of guys are going to get everything they want out of it. And he was one of those guys where you really didn't have to tell him much. He came to work, and he was like, let's go. He took the backpack off and he was ready to go, and he worked his butt off. Guys like Aiden, I mean, I can't speak enough on him because, he's just getting started in the NFL, but you're going to see that type of play and better for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, he's a hell of a player, and if you haven't gotten the chance to watch him, definitely flip on a Lions game down the stretch of the season and check him out, because he is something to watch. So, maybe not the best example for the question that I asked, so I'm going to go ahead and flip that up. Do you have any guys that you've taken under your wing pre-draft and raised their stock, maybe even 2 or 3 rounds above their projections? I guess, how high above a guy's projections can they get during this time?
I don't know if,
or is that even not the right way to look at it?
Well, I just don't think it would have anything, like, I wouldn't have anything to do with that, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not necessarily, making this kid better in a sense. I'm just kind of sharpening up his game. So I wouldn't necessarily have something to do with his stock going up. He can perform better. Senior Bowl and Combine will definitely help you. But I haven't seen too many people, make incredible leaps in the draft. It's usually just, the teams already have an idea of where they're going to take them. And maybe a quarterback or something is an example of guys that will shoot up because of the need.
Sure.
I don't know him, but Zach Wilson. He had one of the most incredible pro days, right? Everyone was in love with his pro day, and he ends up going, I think, second overall, whatever it was. And he probably, now looking back on it, he probably shouldn't have. So sometimes guys can, not necessarily trick you, but they can wow you. The shock value of, wow, this kid is long, strong, mean. Where was he? You turn the film on, you're like, I don't really see it on the film, but it could be there. And I think that's where some guys will move up a little bit, because if you look at the NFL draft, the first round is really just based off of potential and need. They're not drafting guys mostly to come out and start right away. They see the future. They see the value in that first round. So you'll get some guys slide in the first round that maybe have a little bit more shock value in the end. But guys like Aiden, who are surefire, you're not going to see them go past pick 3. And it happened to Quentin Williams in 2019. He went 3rd overall to the Jets.
Yeah, and he's one of your guys, right?
I had him for pre-draft back in 2019. He was my first ever pre-draft training. It was an incredible athlete, really raw. Again, just like, in a way, like Aiden, like knew exactly what he wanted to get out of the program. And, you can see it now translating in the NFL. He's a baller. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Those guys are different, man. So.
Yeah, and even though, okay, by your own admission, and I think you might be not giving yourself all the credit that you deserve, but, even though by your own admission you're not that much of a factor in getting these guys picked, it must feel pretty good when all that work that you guys put in,
that's
results in them hearing their name called.
Yeah, when their name's called, just being with them for that that process of it can be stressful. A lot of these guys, ups and downs, man. Ups and downs. You see these mock drafts, and if you listen to too many voices out there, you might be disappointed. You might be stressed out. Oh, I fell to the 3rd. I was supposed to go in the 2nd. That's $1 million difference. Right, so it can be stressful. So to see them get to where they've been practicing to go and prepping to go is that's the priceless feeling for me, man. I just want to see these guys get to that point, and then, but once you get there, staying there that's the difference.
Right,
staying there,
getting that second contract,
getting the second, third contract, and then also having goals and setting yourself up for success in the off season, because that's truly where you're getting ready for. The work that's displayed on Sundays that you see on game days. If these guys aren't working in the offseason, they're going to go out there and they're going to struggle.
So that's one aspect of your job as a coach, and the other aspect of your job is your position as defensive line coach at College of the Canyons at the junior college level. And I want to talk about that avenue of development for players, because it's really not an avenue that gets a ton of attention on the national stage. The generic path is you play your high school ball, you go to a 4-year college, you get drafted. Talk about your experience coaching at the junior college level, and really the level of talent that is there.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've been doing it for a long time, so I've seen a lot of different teams. I've seen a lot of different talent come through. I've seen a lot of NFL players played against. some guys. Hollywood Brown, for example, he's a College of the Canyons grad. Jason Pierre-Paul, I think Rondell Stevenson. I want to say Rondé Stevenson, the Patriots running back. He was at Cerritos College out here. So you see a lot of NFL talent in the area. Very under-recruited. These guys are, maybe were already at a Division I school and had to bounce back for academic or off-the-field issues, or just weren't happy at the place they were. So you'll get a lot of that. You'll get a lot of kids that were under-recruited in the area that, maybe are, 5'10", 165, but a year in your program, they grew an inch, and they got to 6 feet, and they got to 200 pounds, and now they're a big-time recruit. I see it all the time, and I absolutely love the JUCO route, because that is what I love to do, is develop talent. And when I'm able to get these raw athletes in for, a year to 2 years, I'm able to change some of their lives forever. And I've had a lot of luck, and I've been extremely lucky just to have guys that are buying into my program and going about it the right way, and then they end up signing Division I scholarships and getting school paid for the next 3 to 4 years of their life. And I know that's how hard they worked for it. So that right there is a lot like seeing the guys get drafted, seeing those guys sign scholarships out of JUCO, knowing how hard it was for them while they were there. I'm like, man, I can't say it enough. I'm extremely proud of those guys. It makes me really happy for them.
Yeah, there's definitely an added element of success when somebody has to take one of those routes. It's not exactly the most traditional route. And, adding on to the list of NFL players who have gone that way, not necessarily at College of the Canyons, but you have Aaron Rodgers, you have Tyreek Hill, you have Alvin Kamara. A couple of months ago, we had the Oaks Christian head coach Charlie Collins on the show. He spoke at length about, 2 Hall of Fame caliber wide receivers that he had the chance to coach at Santa Monica, Chad Johnson and Steve Smith. So, the talent is there. And unfortunately, there is still that perception that if you're at the junior college level or even the D2 or D3 level, it's because you weren't, quote unquote, good enough. It was because you didn't have the size. It was because you didn't have the strength, maybe some off the field issues. And of course, for some that is the case. But it's definitely not entirely it. And, I feel like the more you look into the players that have come out of there, the more you realize that a lot of your favorite players, a lot of your favorite NFL players, college players, future Hall of Famers, Heisman Trophy winners, a lot of them spent time there. When you talk about some of the names that we rattled off, how do those guys end up slipping through the cracks and, being maybe under-recruited out of high school?
I think it's a mixture of things. I think at the high school level, especially in California, I don't think I won't speak for all of them, but I know a lot of the coaches, head coaches and throughout the staff probably aren't doing a very good job of educating their student athletes on what junior college actually is, which is a vehicle. At the end of the day, you can take it wherever you want to go with it if you put in the work. And there's not a lot of programs, in my opinion, like College of the Canyons, because they do things the right way. They focus on the small details, on being on time. You know what I mean? Just doing your job, focusing on everything for the team to get the wins. And some people, unfortunately, they're go towards the individual stuff and they don't focus on the, pinpoint the right things to create a great culture. And I think for that reason, a lot of JUCOs struggle. And you won't see a lot of kids go to JUCOs and have success because, they weren't properly educated on what the junior college is for them. They just think, I'm just going to play football. And, maybe they're not going to class because it's their first time never, not having to be at class. They can stay at home and their parents aren't, or whatever it is. It's a tough system to get through, but like College of the Canyons and some other ones do a really good job of, keeping it in-house, tutoring, making sure the kids' grades are right so that they can get to Division I schools. And but I think as far as the athletes they're just under-recruited. It's going to happen more and more now that you're seeing this transfer portal and NIL stuff. They're going to be under-recruited high school athletes everywhere. And that's where JUCO comes in, is, if the coaches are doing their job in recruiting, they're seeing a kid that has no offers, but they're not looking at his stars. They're looking at his film, and then they're like, okay, what can we do to help him?
Right.
A year in our weight room, a year in the conditioning, a year in development, a year in our system. All of a sudden, that kid is, he's pretty good. And then the next year, you're like, oh, okay, that's Division I.
Yeah, I guess you can, you could always look up somebody's star rating from a year or two ago. But when you're playing at that level, it's less about that and more about, okay, what'd you do this year? What can you do right now? Forget what you did in high school. Forget how many stars you had.
We say it all the time. 5 stars will get a coach fired pretty quickly. So, if you recruit based, simply based off of stars and that type of hype, I feel like, you're playing with fire, because at the end of the day, that could come back to bite you when you're looking at a kid that's, a defensive tackle. He's an All-American on paper. But if you're not developing him for what's coming, eventually that All-American gets passed up by a kid that worked his ass off for 4 years. You know what I mean? So, there's obviously the benefits to having a 5-star kid because he's an animal out there.
Sure, you don't get that rating for no reason. But I've always Chances are you're pretty good at football.
100%. And I've always said this, like, give me the kid that's not ranked, and let me see what I can do with him. And that's why I told you I love JUCO, because I've maybe had one bounce back, 5-star kid, 4-star kid, and he was really good. We developed him and we got him back out. But man, I've had kids that had no stars and nobody knew who they were, and we put the work in for 2 straight years, and he ends up signing a Power 5 scholarship. Like, those are the stories that I live for.
So all of that, and you can speak to that obviously because you're very much in that world.
Yeah, no doubt.
What do you think needs to happen at the JUCO level for for it to get the national recognition that it rightfully deserves as a perfectly valid route of development.
I think it starts. I don't know how familiar you are with like the Mississippi, Kansas schools. There's a separation of JUCO, is the California system, and then there's the NJCAA, which is basically Mississippi, Kansas. There's a couple Texas, Iowa schools in them, and that's big business. Like, they play their championship on ESPN Plus. It's big time. California, I feel like whoever's running the show at the top. That's probably where it starts, because they don't give a lot of resources to the schools, even though the schools are bringing in a lot of money off of tuition. The coaches don't get paid anything, pennies on the dollar. The kids, there's no housing for the kids. And in Southern California, that can be a problem, So I just think it starts at the top with resources. And if you can, sprinkle a couple extra things in there, I think that those JUCOs would get a lot more, they'd progress a lot faster.
Right. We touched on this a little bit, but recruitment time and draft time are, obviously such a special time for kids at the high school level, at the college level. But they can also be really stressful, especially with the prevalence of social media. And like we talked about the ranking services, we just talked about how 5 stars can get you fired as a coach, but it's obviously the kids as well who are paying attention to that too. And it's so easy to compare yourself to a kid with 1 more star than you, a kid that, is maybe projected to go 1 round ahead of you. What advice would you give to a young athlete who has all of that information at their fingertips and is, not really sure what to do with it? I mean, it's fun for me to look at because I'm a media guy. It's my job to look at that and analyze it. Does that have any value for a kid?
I want to say it doesn't, but as we've seen, it clearly does. A lot of these kids let that kind of get to their head. But my advice would be, we hear this a lot these days, but be where your feet are, and control the controllables. And that is something that it's so far from controlling that you are damaging your potential by letting that affect your play and affect your grind and affect your mental. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is if you can focus where you are now and think about it. 5 years ago, would you ever think that you were here right now? I know I wouldn't, and I'm sure you wouldn't, and I'm sure, a lot of people wouldn't. So I try to tell these, especially kids in high school that are being recruited heavily, I'm like, it feels good to be wanted. Everyone wants to be wanted. You are one of thousands of kids that are being wanted, and you need to understand that the world doesn't revolve around you. Once you get to this program, you are just like every other kid there, and the recruiting's over. The honeymoon phase is over, man. It's done, and it ends pretty quickly. So you just have to understand what you're getting yourself into. Do your research. Know who you're going to play for. Know who you're going to play with. And I think that helps the process a lot. I think the guys that are getting ready for the NFL, stay away from the media mock drafts. Let your agent, let your manager, your marketing people, let them handle all that stuff. That's what you pay them for. That's what they get paid for. And just focus on yourself. Be a better person. Work on your body in the off season. Work on your game in the off season. Get better at something, and everything else will play out the way it's supposed to.
Love it. Before we go, want to give you a chance to talk about yourself a little bit more. You've already done so much throughout your career already, but I know you have some significant plans for growth in the future. Tell me and tell our viewers what, in your mind, the next several years look like for you.
I mean, but we just talked about it. I'm a big believer in just being in the moment. So I try not to think too much ahead, but I do plan, obviously, just to be prepared for situations. So always looking to see kind of where my next stepping stone is going to be for coaching during the fall. But, have some opportunities coming up, which are, incredible, good opportunities, some tough decisions to make. But I'm really excited, actually, where we are right now is Proactive Sports. We're starting up here in, I want to say 2 days now. I got a class of defensive linemen coming to prep for Senior Bowl and All-Star games and Combine. So, that's the near future for me until March. And then I'll have most of my vets and second-year players will start rolling into California to get prepped for the next season. And I do a little bit of traveling too, which is fun. I'll head to Michigan, train a couple of my vets out there, and Houston, Texas. Some of my guys on the Texans for a little bit, but And that's really what I look forward to the most. Yeah.
Great. Eddy McGilvra, we want to thank you for joining the podcast. Before we go, tell us where to find you and learn more about you.
Instagram is DL Coach Ed. Twitter, same thing. D-Line Coach Ed. Post pretty much all my workout videos and stuff. Some educational stuff for you younger kids out there. Other than that, man, I'm Thousand Oaks, man. I'm out here.
All right. I want to thank you once again for coming on the show. Wish you the best of luck as we get into draft season. I know you get a lot of guys that you're working with, and really looking forward to see how all of that work pays off and what big things that you have
I
cooking
really
up here.
appreciate it, man. No, this was great. And you guys are doing a great job, man. We'd love to see the content.
That means a lot. Thank you so much. All right. Eddy McGilvra, that's going to do it for us today. I'm Phil George, and this has been the Cannon Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow on Instagram at Cannon Sports, TikTok at Cannon Sports Official, and of course, cannonsports.com for all your sporting goods needs.